You know, the interesting thing about contempt is it's our single best predictor of divorce. And the masters of marriage really do all the four horsemen, but they don't do contempt. There's hardly any contempt in their interaction. And when they do it, they really repair it. So contempt is really sulfuric acid for love. But we also found in one of our studies that if you turn down the sound on the videotape and count the number of facial expressions of contempt, it's an excellent predictor of the number of infectious illnesses that the recipient of contempt is going to have in the next 4 years. So it's not only corrosive of love, it's corrosive of immune functioning as well. Really contributes to making people sick. Now, the antidote for contempt is really more complicated than it is for the other four horsemen, because the antidote for contempt is really creating in the marriage a culture of appreciation instead of a culture of criticism. And, you know, and to understand how to really change this culture, you have to kind of understand what the critic is like, the person who really walks into a room feeling somewhat irritable and looks for reasons why he or she is irritable, and then tries to point out to people the mistakes they're making that really are contributing to that person's feelings of irritability. So the critic really, in the critic's mind, the person who really is looking at the relationship in terms of what's missing rather than looking at the relationship in terms of what's there, which is really the antidote for contempt and what the masters do. They're really appreciating what's there. You have to understand what the critic really wants from the world. And I think most critics are really walking around hoping that people will respond to them by saying something like, "Thank you so much for pointing out all my mistakes. You are such an insightful person. And, you know, can we have lunch next Tuesday so you can tell me more about how I've let you down and how I can be a better human being?" You know, this is the way the critic wants people to respond. And it's so disappointing that people don't respond that way, you know. So instead, you know, people avoid the critic. And, you know, and really a lot of this sort of criticism or this attitude of criticism is really a spillover of self-criticism and becomes, you know, I think, a habit of mind that people are applying everywhere. They're applying it to themselves. They're looking at themselves and saying, "Oh, yeah, you know, you're not that smart. You're not that good. You know, you don't deserve that raise. I mean, you know, yeah, you did some things, but, I mean, they don't amount to a hill of beans. You're worthless." You know, and there's this sort of self-dialogue where people are telling themselves these negative things about themselves, and it spills over into the world. Well, as a habit of mind, you know, George Carlin, for example, describes this routine of, you know, again, it's a critical person driving down the highway, you know, and the critic drives down the highway, and there are two kinds of other drivers. There's idiots who drive slower than you do, and there's maniacs who drive faster than you do, you know. So you're driving down the highway going, "Idiot, you know, what's the matter with you? Move, move, you know. You maniac, look at that guy go. He's gonna die, you know." And so you're driving down the highway that way, and it's a habit of mind, you know, that you apply to everything, of really being very involved in people's mistakes. And so the antidote is to really not be involved in people's mistakes, let them make mistakes, but really be involved in scanning for what's working and what's right